Hello everybody and welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope you're doing well, and today we'll be doing a box office preview for this upcoming weekend, which once again sees Avatar: The Way of Water dominating the box office, estimated to get another $35 million, which would be a 24% drop, bringing its total domestic all the way through January 16th, as it is MLK weekend, holiday weekend, up to $574.9 million. So still well on its way to tracking to probably $650 to $700 million domestic by the end of its run. Could be more, could be less. Honestly, it's going to be interesting to see where this film ends up once there actually are films that are really competitive up against it, which won't be for quite a while. So this film has a lot of room to run. We will also see the second weekend numbers for M3GAN come in, and look at that, projected to only drop 44% after a very impressive weekend, going well above what the projections were for it, and the film having broken even just after one weekend of its release. And so we'll talk about that, and also we'll talk about the Wednesday Raven Awards, as they are now up and running, taking in nominations for this year's. We boycott the Oscars every single year because they've just become a joke and have become trash. So we like to have fun and have our own awards show instead. So we'll talk about that at the very end of the box office preview. But before we go any further, please make sure you smash that like button, not that fire button if you're watching on Odyssey, and smash the rumble button as well. And also make sure that you are subscribed to the channel with the bell notification on. That way you know every time the video or live stream goes live on the channel. So as I said, Avatar: The Way of Water projected to make $35 million this weekend, and a 24% drop. Through the 4-day weekend, it is expected to come in at $43.6 million, bringing its total domestic to $574.9. And so it will be interesting on Sunday to be able to compare these numbers, especially, again, adjusted for inflation. Oh, by the way, the people that keep on getting triggered by that, inflation, because it is indeed the only real true way at this point to be able to have fair comparisons of this or any other film with other films of the past, and also really the only fair way to be able to know exactly what comparable films we can look to try to get a better idea of exactly where this film will end up by the end of its run. If you take the unadjusted numbers, then you're just not going to be able to get a really good grasp on it, because a film that came out maybe 5-10 years ago, this film would have already easily surpassed. Whereas if you adjust it for inflation and you realize that those numbers are actually closer, then it gives you a better idea about, okay, so this is probably where the film will end up by the end of its run. Either way, Avatar: Way of Water continues to be much more of a international success than domestic, but still doing very, very well domestically. And it'll be interesting to see where this film ends up if it is able to dethrone Top Gun: Maverick at the top of the domestic box office. It still has that potential, but it also still has a ways to go for that to actually happen. Then we talk about M3GAN. That's right, M3GAN, which has taken the world by storm. I released a clip from the podcast yesterday as the main video, talking about how apparently a TikTok dance is being used by the media to explain why the film did better than the projections. I think, again, that probably played a role to play, had a role to play to it with some extent, but ultimately I would not be surprised if positive word of mouth, as I've heard a lot of positive things about this film, has probably had a bigger effect on the overall totals for the film. It is projected to only drop 44%, so for a week 1 to week 2 drop off, that is very strong, especially for a film of this nature. So it's expected to have a domestic of around $58.2 million when all is said and done by the end of the MLK weekend. So very strong numbers. Right now, it's just adding to its profits at this point, because it's very clear on its budget, unlike some other films on this list. And so it'll be interesting to see how much actual profit this film is actually able to make in comparison to its budget, as ultimately that is going to be probably the best way to know exactly, as far as financial success is concerned, what exactly the film is going to do. We also see a wide release finally for A Man Called Otto from Sony Pictures, expected to make around $12 million, so it's going to bring its total domestic by the end of its run to around end of the weekend to $20.2 million. This is a film that saw a very, very small initial release, and so once again, very, very hard to track as far as what I project the final numbers will be on the movie because of its slow rollout. But we will be able to start making some projections on how much money this film cost, how much money this film has actually made or lost, and it'll be interesting to break those numbers down with this Tom Hanks starring film. Puss in Boots expected to drop 17%, so it's another strong hold there. So that's the kind of numbers that this film is going to need to be able to continue to put up in order for it to break even, which it looks like it is very much on the cusp of doing probably by the end of this weekend, based on the numbers that we saw last. We also have the new movie Plane coming out, which is only expected to make $7 million, so definitely not a strong number there for this new release. Same thing also with House Party from Warner Brothers, $2.1 million there. is what the projection is for that movie. And let me just say, based on the trailer for House Party, it just looks absolutely cringe. It's about a group of people, two people who basically break into LeBron James' house and then throw a house party. Just sounds like one of the dumbest concepts in the world. And again, this is coming from a studio that made films like Space Jam 2, which was also a terrible film featuring LeBron James. So it's really not all that surprising that this film is not expected to do all that well. It'll be interesting to see what the budget is for this movie, though, and what we can, again, project for it. Interestingly enough, it is only getting released in 1,500 screens, so I'm kind of wondering if they're going to be doing a simultaneous release on HBO Max, or if they're trying a slow rollout, or whatever that might actually be. Black Panther Wakanda Forever expected to have a 14% drop, and look at that, $450 million. As projected, right, as I have been saying for weeks, the film would end somewhere between 450 and 500 domestic, and it's looking like that is panning out, as I had said. I Want to Dance with Somebody expected to drop 30%, so still not really enough for it to be able to pull itself out of the hole that it's in. The Whale still released in 1,500 screens, so finally getting a little bit of a wider release. It's actually available now in my area, so I cannot wait to actually see it, because this is really the last film I really want to see before making my top 5, top 10, bottom 5, bottom 10 list of 2022. And so I'm very excited to be able to see this probably either maybe tonight or at the very least sometime this weekend. And then The Fabelmans continues to hang around as well. But again, this has had a very weird release, and so it's hard to say whether or not it has been successful or not. One thing I do want to point out as well is the box office coverage over at Deadline, as they are talking here about saying how James Cameron is expected to make around $35 million. Just show you, again, the differences between these two. So again, they're expecting it to be around the same amount of money. That's not always the case. Sometimes Box Office Pro uses a slightly different metric, which ends up being a little bit different than what the studio projects or what the other industry so-called experts will project. But ultimately, this is definitely going to be quite strong. It points out that it is expected to pass the, it's expected to pass the entire total of Rogue One: A Star Wars Stories, $533.5 million. However, I imagine that is without inflation. So once again, that is a number that you do have to take into account to have the actual real value of what this film made. Disney continues to have a majority, and this is where something I've made this point before, and people have again use it as a, oh, you're just trying to make excuses for it. It's like, no, I'm just pointing out a mere fact. Disney continues to have a majority of the PLFs and Dolby Alternatives. Last weekend saw 65% of its 45.8 million coming in from premium formats. And so what that means is that of the tickets that were sold last weekend for Avatar: The Way of Water, 65% of them were in IMAX, Dolby, and those premium screens. And that's not even including just regular 3D showings in regular auditoriums. So the point of what I'm trying to make with this is that the vast majority of tickets that are being sold for this movie are being sold at a premium ticket price. And so that is something that you do have to take into account, because yes, it's making a lot of money, right? Or at least if you believe James Cameron, whether it's Monday or Tuesday, depending on what number he wants to throw out there or what metric he wants to throw out there, right, is going to be ultimately your decision. But what it does show you is that there are less people going to see it, but they're able to continue to make more money, or seemingly make more money, because of the fact that the vast majority of those tickets are being, again, paid for by people who are clearly fans of the film, fans of James Cameron, people who love the film, people who really want to go see the film. And that means that you are going to have a big return on that investment, because even if you have less overall people going to see it, if your ticket price is much higher than what other films have been in the past, then that means that your number will ultimately be higher. I don't see why that's controversial, or why, again, people for some reason can't stand math. It also mentions that they are expected M3GAN to make $17 to $20 million in the Friday to Monday span. So again, very similar there. In regards to the new stuff, Lionsgate's Gerard Butler film Plane at 3,000 plus theaters, expected to make $7 to $10 million over 4 days. 64% fresh with critics, which does not matter. 34% rotten, that gave the Butler pre-pandemic Angel Has Fallen. Critics didn't weigh that the movie down, again, because critics really don't have that much of an impact on films anymore, as we have seen countless times over and over again. It says, in the first of many titles pulled from HBO Max for a theatrical release, Warner Brothers is opening New Line's reboot of House Party, 1,300 locations in theatrical window that will trigger better results for a movie in subsequent downstreams. The pick of the remake of the 1990 is directed by Calmatic and has outlook in the mid-single digits. In House Party, the high school blah, 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 has collectively grossed close to 65 million. Stateside House Party is on a 17-day theatrical window. Again, what's with the 17 days here? Until PVOD, 45 days until hitting HBO Max. And so it looks like this is a film that was originally slated for HBO Max, and why they're just going to release it in 1,300 screens and have it for 17 days, it could be anyone's guess. I guess they're not projecting it to make that much money, and they recognize that, again, after the split that they have with the actual movie theaters, probably not going to end up being that much of a return on their investment. So those are the numbers as they stand. And so before ending, I do want to talk about the Wednesday Raven Awards. And so again, it is our award show where we like to be able to award the best and the worst of the year all in one show. It is our Oscars boycott as well. And so if you want to have your voice heard, again, if you want to nominate Avatar for Best Picture of the Year, if you want to nominate Avatar as the Worst Picture of the Year, or if you want to nominate any of the other films, right, that we have talked about on this channel, as we have talked about a plethora of other films up until the release of Avatar, we can indeed have you have the opportunity to do so. And so all you need to do is check out the pinned comment, which will bring you to it's a Google form, and then all you need to do is put in your answers, right? So all you need to do is actually type in your answers, and you will be able to nominate, again, whatever films that you wish. And again, the films do need to be having a release date of 2022. So nothing from this year, nothing from the year previous, right? So even if a film played into 2022, right, as long as the release date is 2022, that is what makes it eligible. So anyone who submits responses where it features films that are not from the year 2022, those will not be counted. But for everyone else, it will be. So far, 31 responses. Very interesting to see where people are standing as far as the best movie of the year. So again, once we finally have this in the next couple weeks, this will be closed. So that way we can release the nominations, the official nominations, again, voted on by you, the people, the same day as the Oscars release theirs, again, because we like to boycott them in the best way possible. And even, again, if it is a very small group of people, as it tends to be, is at the very least a few extra eyes that will not be watching the Oscars, just like no one watched the Golden Globes, which is at one of its worst viewings of all time, and that's also to no surprise. We at least the very least like to have fun here on the channel. So check that out in the pinned comment down below. But also, what are y'all's thoughts? Do you think Avatar Way of Water is going to be able to beat the domestic box office for Top Gun Maverick? Again, Top Gun Maverick topped out around $718 million or so. This film is at $574 after about 4 to 5 weeks. So again, it definitely is having that pace, having that very strong hold, but the big question is ultimately going to be, will that hold continue? Will there be any films that come out in the next few weeks that might be able to actually provide some competition, and also where the film just generally ends up? Let me know your thoughts about this and anything else I mentioned in the comment section down below. If you like this video, smash that like button, lap the fire button, honestly, and smash the rumble button. You're all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless. And now for a huge shout out to all of my January Patreon Subscribe Star and Locals members at the Keeper of the Bifrost level and above. Starting off with my Patreon members, Father Luca Illich, Garrett Searles, Heimir Ari Hymason, Joe Horn, Jonathan Carney, Orange Chat Reviews, who you can check out on his YouTube channel, Orange Chat Reviews, Rosetta Allen, who you can check out at her YouTube channel, Eagle Writer, and Miss Martin Muses, who you can check out at her YouTube channel, Miss Martin Muses, and of course, the amazing Empress of the Universe, Tina B, who you can check out over on her YouTube channel, Tina B, with her show Soup to Nuts, which she does, tries to do every single week with her friend and with fellow Valkyrie and fellow mod of the channel, Stephanie B. And also a special shout out to the Modern Major General of the channel, Laura Story. Thank you again for joining. And of course, I do want to give a special shout out to Tina B and make sure that everyone knows that our prayers are being extended towards her as she continues to recover from complications that have occurred recently with her medically and has resulted in a loss of eyesight, or at the very least of more clear eyesight. So to continue to offer our prayers for her. Also a shout out to my Subscribe Star peeps, Matt317, who can check out on his Twitch channel by the same name, The R, Fast Reaction, Mr. Roy, J-Rod the Beer Guru, and the K-Man, who you can check out over at xtheboundaries.co. And lastly, to my Locals members, Miss Minnesota Hockey Fan, How About a Hockey Player, J.H. Schwalbach, Brett D90, and the amazing lawyer Robert Barnes. So thank you all very much for supporting me on Local, Subscribe Star, and Patreon. If you want your name shouted out at the end of every live stream and video, please check out the top link in the video description below, where you get access to this, and also, of course, to a monthly podcast that I do with John the Flick Flickinger. Also, access to a giveaways channel on my Discord, where I give away films this month. I've got films like Seven Samurai on Blu-ray from the Criterion Collection to give away, The Banshees of Inisherin, Tommy Boy Steelbook, Edge of Tomorrow 4K, and tons of other 4Ks and Steelbooks as they get released over the next month will be be available, and also, of course, digital codes as well. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, check out that top link and join over on Patreon, Subscribestar, or on Locals. You guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless.